Hello and welcome to Face to Face. In the past week, the Accord, the long-standing agreement between the unions and the Labor government, stretched almost to breaking point. And it was also the week which saw the much vaunted relationship between the Prime Minister and ACTU Secretary Bill Kelty hit rock bottom. So I guess the question is, what would be different under a Howard government? Well, it's hard to make much of an assessment since the coalition has been careful to keep its industrial relations policy well and truly under wraps. But joining us on Face to Face from Melbourne is the opposition spokesman on industrial relations, Peter Reith. Peter Reith, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Also on our panel, the Seven Network's chief political correspondent, Glenn Milne, and Catherine Jobe from ABC Radio. Welcome to you both. Peter Reith, the Labor government says, OK, the CRA dispute wasn't good, but it's just a taste of what Australia will get under your policy should you win government.
Well, they've certainly been running that line, but I think, as we've seen in the last week or so, they've had a lot of trouble substantiating the line, and it's very obvious that, you know, this dispute has arisen under Labor, both at the federal level and at the state level, and Mr Brereton has no response to the obvious statement that these contracts are lawful under Labor. They are, in fact, of course, simply over-award arrangements for individuals. And they also have no response to the clear and obvious fact that, by and large, the CRA workforce have entered into these agreements on a voluntary basis because, for better pay, they're prepared to make a better effort, and it's to the interests of both. So basically, the company, I think, has shown that they're prepared to work to win the hearts and minds of their own employees, and that's very hard for the Labor Party to stomach.
How would you solve that sort of dispute, Peter Reith, should you win government?
Well, let's have a look at what's actually happened in this dispute. From the company's point of view, they've paid the employees an 8% increase, but they made that offer before the dispute escalated. They've been prepared to look at the situation of an award employee and a contract employee, and there have been negotiations in the Commission on that basis, which was also an offer they made before the dispute escalated. But most importantly, from the company's point of view, the individual contract system is still in place, and they are not changing their basic approach with their workforce. So in terms of what needs to be changed, the truth of the matter is that what this company is doing is what lots of other companies are doing around Australia. The government has no intentions whatsoever of changing the legal framework within which they intend to operate, and in response to your question, nor do we. I think people should be entitled to enter into over-award individual contracts, and certainly under us that will continue to be the case as it is under Labor.
Peter Reith, one of your own former colleagues, Ian McPhee, has been very critical of CRA. He says it's not what other companies are doing at all, as you just stated. He says they've behaved like mavericks and outrageous, really.
It's not so much a matter of me defending CRA. I think you only need to...
Do you defend them, Peter Reith?
Well, I do, in the sense that, let me make an even stronger point, though. I mean, I have talked to CRA employees, and CRA employees have been saying publicly this week, even today in the media, that the reason that they've been prepared to enter into individual contracts is because they're better off. And as they say, the union has not been interested in protecting their interests.
Mr. Reith, can I just take you up on that point about being better off? One of the attacks that Paul Keating has launched on you is that it's OK up to a point getting extra money for over-award contracts, but what happens when the workplace becomes de-unionised? They lose the they lose the protection of the union. What could you do under a coalition government to ensure that after that point was reached, wages weren't driven down again?
Well, our policy, of course, is to provide a floor to contractual arrangements between the parties. I mean, one of the basic tenets of our policy position is that we will retain the award system. What we're saying is that we want people to have a greater choice if they wish to enter into individual or collective arrangements with their employer. So in terms of the answer to that question, the answer is quite simple. We will maintain a safety net. We'll maintain the safety net jurisdiction of the Commission for the low paid.
But
we will retain the award system as it is today, Glenn.
Yeah, but that's a minimum. That's a minimum. What does an individual worker do when the union's driven out of the workplace? Where's he go?
Well, let's look at CRA. I mean, the attack on CRA is that they're prepared to pay their people over award. That is the basic attack that the ACTU is mounting. Now, on neither side of politics, ultimately, can there really be a regulation of the over-award system? The only real question for Labor now is, are they now contemplating a much greater regulation of the system over and above awards. I certainly agree with the proposition that awards should provide a safety net, and that safety net will continue under us.
Before we go on with that particular point, I wonder if I might bring you back to the first question, though. Faced with a dispute like this, Mr Reith, what would you do? Mr Keating stood up and said that it should be resolved in the Industrial Relations Commission. What would you do if a dispute like this blew up?
Well, I mean, this dispute has occurred under Labor, but let me answer your question quite specifically. But I don't want anybody to, be distracted by our policy, given the fact that this has happened under Labor. But certainly under us, we are proposing some changes to the existing situation. We certainly stand behind the policy commitment to effective secondary boycott provisions. It is, in a sense, a last measure for companies to be able to take common law action, but we certainly support those provisions. So does Labor, I might say. The difference between us is that their provisions have been shown to be woefully inadequate. We are in favour of adequate provisions. We also think that the Commission, where it issues a direction, that should provide the basis for injunctive action being taken by affected parties, and we would certainly improve the compliance measures of the existing arrangement.
So would there be a role for the Industrial Relations Commission on secondary boycotts? I mean, at the moment, the companies have to go through the IRC before they can pursue common law action. Under a coalition government, would they be able to bypass the Industrial Relations Commission and simply sue individuals and unions?
Yeah, putting it back into the Commission was just Labor's way of trying to gut those provisions.
So under a coalition government, it wouldn't have ended up back in the Commission?
Well, it's very clear under us. We will reinstate sections 45D and E of the Trade Practices Act so that people have effective secondary boycott provisions. But as to whether this issue would have gone back to the Commission, this issue has basically been about award employees. The Commission's powers in that respect under us will remain intact. And it was always the case that this dispute could go back to the Commission, and we won't change that. The union, let me make it clear, I mean, the union itself in the last 2 years has not on any occasion actually applied for an increase in wages, the minimum award rate for those employees.
So under a coalition government, we still could have had this resolution where we had the chair of the Industrial Relations Commission ordering negotiations on the basis that she did?
Well, certainly there's no basis upon which there'd be any change in that regard. But, I mean, Cathy, when you say there's been a resolution of the dispute, the guys at Weipa are still out, and their claim is that they should get exactly the same as people under contracts as award employees. Now, quite frankly, I don't think they're going to get that. The fact is you can't compare apples with oranges.
But surely, Mr Reith, I mean, if you can just walk out as a company under your system and sue without going through the Industrial Relations Commission, that's just going to cause all sides to dig in, isn't it?
No, I don't think it is. And look, we've only had Labor's system in place for, what, the last couple of years. Sections 45D and E have been a very useful recourse for companies. The threat of the use of sections 45D and E in that minority of situations where people are being unreasonable
Peter Reith, we just have to leave it there for a moment. We'll be back very shortly, and we'll continue with the Opposition Industrial Relations spokesman after this. Welcome back. On Face to Face, we're talking with the Opposition Industrial Relations spokesman, Peter Reith. Peter Reith, you mentioned the safety net earlier. Let's talk about the so-called no disadvantage test. You've said you will keep that test, but it'll be different from the government's. Doesn't that give Laurie Burton every right to say that it's going to be a trapdoor to lower wages?
No, in fact, it's a complete rebuttal to Laurie's usual scare campaign, the old lorry of lies. And the reason it's a rebuttal is that we are prepared in that safety net to provide some minimum conditions below which people can't go.
But how will you decide those minimum conditions?
Well, we've already said quite a bit about this. We've said, for example, that firstly, people who are on the award system can remain there. That's the first thing to be said, and that is really the a big plank of that, because for most people they're on the award system today, or many of them are, and under us they can stay there. We give them that guarantee. If you do go to an agreement, we say that the agreement should meet certain community standards. We think, for example, that the hourly rate of pay should be reflective of the award, so you shouldn't go less than that specified by the award.
So it will be the same as the award, Mr Reith?
We've said it will be the base hourly rate relevant applicable classification award rate, so that's a reference back to the award as a benchmark. We may say some more about that in due course. We've also said annual leave provisions, 4 weeks annual leave, paid leave, of course, is important community standard. Paid sick leave is an important community standard. I've also floated jury service. The difference between what you get from the court and what your pay would be is also a community standard that people would expect.
Would the government have any role, coalition government have any role in setting those rates? I mean, you said you might have a little more to say about the minimum hourly rate, for example. Would it be based on one base award rate or a basket of rates? I mean, how would that work?
Well, our thinking obviously has been to relate it to the relevant award, so that if you're a fitter and turner, Glenn, and you front up to a business and that business is prepared to offer you a job on a individual or collective basis, then whatever that arrangement would have been under the award remuneration should be reflected in that contractual arrangement.
You've also said that you'll continue to have safety net increases. How will those be run? Will a coalition government take a national wage case to the IRC? Will you leave it to the ACTU? How will it come about?
Well, the ACTU obviously may well make an application, as they have in the past. Basically, we envisage the existing arrangements to continue. I wouldn't describe them as national wage cases of the sort that we once had, Kathy, but certainly we think the Commission should have that jurisdiction, and the Commonwealth and employers and employee bodies, of course, at that time would make their submissions, as is the case today.
Well, given that the Coalition has supported only one safety net increase in the last 12 years, how could we expect that they'd go in and support any safety net increases the ACTU was applying for, rather than arguing against them?
Well, I won't argue about how many times we've supported it. I mean, our basic position is that we would like people to have higher real wages.
But
we don't want those. We don't want the. No, but Kathy, I think let's get this clear. Our policy is for people to have higher real wages.
But not necessarily through the award. Mr. Howard, I think, even puts his support for national wage cases at 3 in the last 12 years.
Well, look, quite frankly, I think it's just trivial and immaterial. I mean, the real question is, what can we do so that people can have higher real wages? And you would hear the government say they've supported every wage increase, since time immemorial. But average weekly earnings have actually declined in Australia in the last 13 years by 1.4%. So let's not kid ourselves about that. What we want is higher real wages, but we want a system that works so that people can really enjoy those additional dollars and not have them swept away in inflationary demands.
Well, can we come back 1 second from higher real wages? Let's talk about one of the issues that dominated the CRA dispute, equal pay, the equal pay issue for equal work. There's a test case about to start in the IRC on that issue. Will a coalition government amend the Act to guarantee equal pay for equal work before the Commission?
Well, it's in the Act now. It's in the Act now, and it's been...
But it was an issue in the CRA dispute because they moved to contracts.
Well, look, I think this CRA dispute on equal pay is a bit of a furphy. I mean, let me give you this analogy, Glenn. It's like saying, look, every member of an AFL football team is an AFL footballer, therefore they should all get the same. Now,
so the answer's no? Is the answer no?
So on that basis, Gary Ablett's in for a big pay cut next year. I think it's a complete furphy, and let's see what the decision is.
All right, Peter Reith, we'll take a short break there, and we'll return with Peter Reith right after this break. You're watching Face to Face. Our guest, the Opposition Industrial Relations spokesman, Peter Reith. Peter Reith, there's been a lot of criticism of the opposition not releasing policies. Will you release, before the next election, draft industrial relations legislation?
I don't think there's been a lot of criticism at all,
Are you
Neil.
serious?
Well, I am quite serious about that. I can tell you what most ordinary people say, and they say, you had 700 pages of details last time, you got creamed by Keating with his scare campaign.
And we've got nothing this time.
Well, I don't think that's right either.
You've gone from one extreme to the other, haven't you?
Well, I don't think we have. If you take industrial relations, we've been quite upfront, and I invite you to ask me another 10 questions on details, and I'll give you an answer on most of them.
Well, why don't you just answer that?
I'll give you an answer on most of the detail which people are interested in, and which will give them enough to make an informed decision at the next election.
Will they be able to make that informed decision based on draft industrial relations legislation, Peter Reith?
We will certainly have a document entitled Industrial Relations Policy issued formally before the election, but I can tell you, anybody listening to this, they want to know about our policy. ring me in my office in Hastings in Victoria and I'll send you all my speeches and you'll have a pretty clear idea.
Well, among those who are interested are the Democrats, who've said that unless they see policy detail before the election campaign, then they won't regard the coalition as having a mandate for radical change if it's elected.
Well, I just think that's... I mean, the Democrats say these things because, you know, they're trying to get themselves a bit of airtime to try and make themselves relevant. I think instead of focusing on us, the Democrats have got a big job to ensure their relevance after the next election, which most commentators would agree is now in doubt.
But haven't they got a point when they say that what the coalition seems to be doing now is saying will be a change of government, but we won't change much. Therefore, that would be the mandate.
No, I think the mandate on industrial relations is very clear. Look, the OECD said that Australia's got two big problems between you know, where we are today and a modern, efficient industrial relations system. One is that the system is incredibly complex. It's just basically beyond the comprehension of both large and small businesses to operate within it. And the other big problem with our industrial relations system is that whilst the government says direct relations are a good idea, you know, have one-on-one relations at work, the trouble is the unions are always wanting to come down, sit at the table and basically drive a wedge between the parties. Now, we are going to remove uninvited, unwanted, unnecessary union influence. If an employee wants to be represented by a union under us, they will be entitled to do so. But we will give them genuine choice. If they don't want to be in a union, they don't have to be. If they want to be in a union, we will welcome responsible unionism.
Well, on that point, Peter Reith, I've got a detailed question for you. Will you amend the Industrial Relations Act to make it easier for contract negotiations to take place between workers and bosses with less interference by either the Commission or the unions?
Yes, we will.
How will you do that?
Well, let me go in more detail. For example, at the moment, if you enter into an enterprise flexibility agreement, which is supposed to be a non-union agreement under the government system, which has been one of the great flops in Australian industrial relations policy, to get that agreement approved, you've got to take it down to the Commission. Now, even though you've got a non-union shop, when you get to the Commission, you're bumping into all these union leaders who will front up before the Commission and attack an agreement which has been approved of by, in some cases, with unanimous support of the people at the workplace. We will remove that right of intervention for unions where they have no union members in a particular workplace or are to be a party to an agreement. Now, that's a very clear detail. We will remove that, Glenn, I give you that guarantee.
How will you, in the future, let's say a workplace has de-unionised itself down the track and an employer says to a prospective employee or even a current employee, sign this or no job. How will you protect that person who's got no union to go to?
Well, that is the law today. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. That is the law today. Under Labor's system, if there is an agreement in place at a particular enterprise and you turn up as a new employee, you don't get a choice as to whether you have the award or not under Labor's system. As for the employer who says, you know, you're under the award today and if you don't sign this agreement, you get the sack, well, under us, you will have a right of application under the unfair dismissal law to claim both reinstatement and compensation. Very clear. Thank you for the detailed question.
Peter Reith, we'll leave it there for a moment and we'll be back with more of Face to Face after this. Welcome back. Peter Reith, in the few minutes we've got left, you once said you had the leadership baton in the knapsack. Where is it these days?
Yeah, well, it's not with me, I can tell you that.
Where have you put it, or is that a rude question?
Yeah, well, it is a rude question, and I can't tell you where I put it, but I certainly haven't got it. I'm amazed you'd ask me such a question. It was a ridiculous question.
What happens if Labor wins again? Another rabbit out of the hat by Paul Keating. What happens?
Look, I've been around too long to answer questions like that. I think we got pretty good prospects. I'm not complacent about it.
Everybody thought you'd win last time too, though, Peter.
Yeah, they did, and so I've been burnt by making predictions in the past. I don't make predictions this time, but I'm certainly not setting out my options for a post-win situation for Labor. The only thing I'd say, if Labor gets back in, they'll do what they did last time, and that is they'll pay back to the unions for their support, and that's really what CRA, I think, politically was all about. They were basically pulling Paul Keating into line, making it clear to him they're going to return to the 70s, and they'll expect him to pay back if Labor were to be returned. It's the real big worry, I think. We now have no industrial relations policy from Labor. That's all dead. The Accord's in tatters, and it'll be very interesting to see what their policy would be. Let's hope we don't.
In terms of that relationship with the unions, Labor's relationship with the unions, have you got any sort of dialogue with Bill Kelty? I mean, do you like the bloke? Do you get on with him? Is there some channel of communication you'll be able to open?
Yeah, well, we both support Essendon. That's a good start, Glenn. It's a very tight-knit, you know, bonding situation in Melbourne.
So you chat at the football, do you?
Well, I had a very good discussion with Bill and Jenny George. I have spoken to and have regular contact with a number of senior members of the ACTU. It's a bit hard with some of them because some of them are just ALP fronts. But I went to the Victorian Trades Hall Council the other day. We had a big debate. I'm more than happy to sit down and talk, and we'll continue to do so.
Peter Reith, excuse me, sorry. If the coalition does win, will you be the Industrial Relations Minister? Will shadow ministers retain their portfolios?
You'll have to ask Mr Howard. I mean, I would obviously like...
Have you had any inkling, though?
No, I haven't had any inkling. Why would I ask? I mean, I'm doing a job between now and the next election. What happens after the election, that's a job for Mr Howard.
And very quickly, John Howard in Bennelong, 3% margin, I think. What if he loses?
I think John Howard will be... he'll bolt back in, and I think he's doing very well. As far as that seat is concerned, I know people have said, oh, you know, he's a lot of interest in the Sydney runway. The fact is, John's doing a job as the leader. It's quite an important issue in Sydney. All
right, Peter Reith, we have to leave it there. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
And that is Face to Face for this Sunday. Thanks to our guest in Melbourne, the Opposition Industrial Relations spokesman, Peter Reith. And of course, thanks to our guests, Catherine Jobe from ABC Radio and Glenn Milne, our Chief Political Correspondent. Our thanks also to you, and we'll be back next Sunday night with another Face to Face. Until then, from all of us here, good night.